Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. It started quietly. Lorries turned away at the border, their drivers confused and anxious, unsure why their routine journey had suddenly come to a halt. The early morning air was thick with uncertainty as word spread among the drivers. Something was wrong, but no one knew exactly what. For years, these shipments had crossed the border without incident, forming the invisible backbone of North America's breakfast tables. A routine shipment was suddenly rejected, paperwork stamped with red ink, and trucks full of perishable goods left idling in no man's land. The border, usually a symbol of cooperation, had become a barrier overnight. On September 30, 2025, the U.S. government cited vague sanitary concerns and abruptly blocked 172 million dozen Canadian eggs, over 2 billion eggs, destined for American tables. The announcement sent shockwaves through the food industry, as warehouses and distribution centers scrambled to respond to the sudden embargo. News outlets flashed urgent headlines and social media buzzed with speculation and outrage. This wasn't a minor customs issue, it was a dramatic escalation in US-Canada tensions, shaking supply chains and diplomatic ties. Grocery store shelves emptied almost overnight, and the ripple effects were felt from small-town diners to major supermarket chains. The crisis exposed just how interconnected and vulnerable the continent's food systems had become. For decades, agricultural trade across the border symbolized partnership and stability. Generations of farmers and truckers had built livelihoods on this steady flow of goods, and the seamless exchange of food was a point of pride for both nations. The border was more than a line on a map, it was a lifeline. Now, a staple food was at the center of a political standoff. Eggs, once taken for granted, became a flashpoint in a much larger conflict, their absence a daily reminder of the crisis. Washington's reasoning was thin, leaving Canadians scrambling for answers and suspecting deliberate economic pressure. Farmers faced mounting losses, and officials struggled to reassure a public growing increasingly anxious about food security. The move signaled a new low in relations between President Trump and Prime Minister Carney, entangled with disputes over tariffs and fighter jets. The egg embargo became the latest flashpoint in a series of bitter disagreements, fueling protests and heated debates in both countries. The so-called Great Egg Wall became a symbol of how political feuds disrupt everyday life and threaten a century-old alliance. What began as a bureaucratic decision quickly grew into a national controversy, with ordinary people caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, food security was a pawn in a high-stakes diplomatic game, exposing the fragility of North American ties. The breakfast crisis on the border was more than a story about eggs. It was a warning about how quickly trust and cooperation can crack under pressure. The egg crisis is just the latest crack in a partnership long under strain. US-Canada trade, once seamless, has been battered by disputes over lumber, dairy, and metals, rooted in protectionism and clashing interests. The USMCA was supposed to ease tensions, but under President Trump, trade became a weapon. In May 2025, new tariffs on Canadian goods, justified by security concerns, further poisoned the well. A failed summit between Carney and Trump only deepened mistrust as Canada sought dialogue and the US doubled down on leverage. Canadian officials now see US trade moves as economic warfare, not negotiation. The egg blockade is the culmination of escalating tactics, transforming a partnership into a rivalry and leaving billions of eggs and the alliance at risk. U.S. authorities offered only unspecified sanitary concerns for the egg rejection. No evidence, no details. Canadian inspectors, known for strict standards, were baffled, fueling suspicions of political motives. The timing was telling. The blockade hit as Canada faced a deadline on a $19 billion F-35 fighter jet deal. Many saw the eggs as leverage. Buy American jets, or your farmers suffer. President Trump inflamed matters, accusing Carney of poisoning Americans and turning a trade dispute into a personal feud. The sequence, tariffs, warnings, now eggs, looked like a coordinated campaign to pressure Ottawa. By weaponizing a food staple, the U.S. crossed a line, risking backlash at home and abroad. The egg crisis marked a dramatic escalation with real consequences for both nations. The fallout was immediate. American supermarkets faced empty shelves and rationed eggs. Domestic producers couldn't fill the gap, and prices soared, hitting low-income families hardest. Bakeries and food manufacturers scrambled, facing shortages and rising costs. For Canada, the blow was severe. Millions of perishable eggs with nowhere to go, threatening farmers' livelihoods. Trust in the U.S. market evaporated overnight. The crisis became a political flashpoint as Americans questioned policies that led to food shortages. The intended punishment of Canada backfired, creating hardship for U.S. consumers. The egg blockade showed how aggressive diplomacy can spark chaos at home. At the heart of the standoff lies Canada's controversial plan to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets, a deal worth a staggering $19 billion. This isn't just a routine military upgrade, it's a decision that will shape Canada's defense capabilities for decades, and one that's become a lightning rod for political debate and public scrutiny. For the United States, the sale is about far more than just dollars and cents. It's a cornerstone of North American defense strategy, a symbol of alliance unity, and a way to ensure that Canada remains tightly integrated with U.S. military planning and technology. The F-35 is seen as a linchpin in the broader effort to modernize NORAD and maintain a technological edge over potential adversaries. That's why Washington has pressured Ottawa relentlessly, making it clear that the F-35 purchase is directly tied to deeper NORAD cooperation and the future of joint continental defense. Behind closed doors, American officials have warned that backing out could strain the alliance at a critical moment. Yet the F-35 program itself is far from flawless. Chronic delays, technical glitches, and ballooning costs have plagued the project from the start, giving Carney's government plenty of reasons to hesitate. Each setback raises new questions about whether the jet is truly worth the investment. A damning U.S. government report recently revealed major software setbacks and spiraling budgets, fueling Canadian doubts and sparking heated debate in Parliament. Critics argue that taxpayers are being asked to foot the bill for a jet that may never deliver on its promises. The F-35 has become a political football, tossed between parties and governments for years. Shifting campaign promises, fierce parliamentary debates, and growing public skepticism have all made the jet a symbol of broader questions about Canada's military priorities and spending. Now, any move to cancel the deal would be seen in Washington as a serious betrayal, one that could have real diplomatic consequences. In this tense climate, the egg blockade feels almost inevitable, a sign of just how high the stakes have become. Ultimately, the fighter jet decision is more than a procurement choice. It's a test of Canada's independence, its relationship with the U.S., and the future of the alliance itself. The world is watching to see which path Ottawa will choose. As U.S. pressure mounts, Sweden's Saab Group pitches its Gripen E fighter as a Canadian alternative. Saab offers local assembly, tech transfer, and jobs, an appealing package for Canada's economy. The Gripen is designed for Arctic conditions, operating from rough runways with minimal support. Canada and Sweden recently deepened defense ties, signaling Ottawa's willingness to look beyond the U.S. The Swedish option gives Carney leverage and a possible off-ramp from the F-35 standoff. Choosing Gripen would assert Canadian independence but risk U.S. retaliation and strain NORAD. The decision is about more than jets, it's about Canada's strategic direction. Amid trade and defense disputes, a new battle emerges: the fight for global talent. President Trump's $100,000 H-1B visa fee aims to curb skilled immigration, shocking the tech world. Canada seizes the moment. Prime Minister Carney welcomes talent the U.S. is turning away. Industry groups urge Ottawa to streamline immigration, hoping to attract engineers and entrepreneurs fleeing U.S. restrictions. The brain drain could become a brain gain for Canada, boosting its innovation economy. This talent war adds a new dimension to the U.S.-Canada rivalry. While the U.S. doubles down on protectionism, Canada bets on openness and global talent. The visa policy may end up exporting the very people who drive economic growth. Canada stands ready to benefit. Experts warn that the egg crisis marks a dangerous new chapter, representing a significant escalation that breaks long-standing norms in U.S.-Canada relations. What was once a stable and predictable partnership is now clouded by uncertainty as both countries grapple with the fallout of this unprecedented move. The diplomatic shockwaves are being felt not just in government offices, but across industries and communities on both sides of the border. Dr. Alistair Finch, a leading trade policy analyst, calls it weaponizing food supply, a tactic that injects unpredictability into cross-border business and undermines decades of trust. He warns that this kind of economic brinkmanship could have ripple effects far beyond eggs, potentially impacting other essential goods and services that flow between the two nations every day. Former Ambassador Eleanor Vance says trust is eroding at the highest levels, forcing Canada to look for new partners and alliances, as seen in its recent overtures to Sweden. She notes that these diplomatic shifts are not just symbolic, They signal a realignment in how Canada approaches its international relationships, seeking stability and reliability elsewhere. Economist Sarah Bethune highlights the fragility of North America's deeply integrated supply chains. She points out that political risk now looms over every deal, making companies and investors nervous about the future. The once seamless flow of goods is now threatened by uncertainty, and even minor disruptions could have major economic consequences. Businesses may be forced to decouple, raising costs and reducing efficiency. Executives are already considering contingency plans, from shifting supply routes to investing in new infrastructure, all of which could drive up prices for consumers and slow economic growth. Professor Michael Clark frames the crisis as a clash of worldviews, U.S. transactional nationalism versus Canada's commitment to a rules-based order. He argues that this ideological divide is fueling the current standoff, making compromise more difficult and raising questions about the future of North American cooperation. The decisions over the F-35 fighter jet and the egg supply are more than isolated incidents. They will define the trajectory of North American cooperation for years to come. These choices reflect deeper tensions and will set precedents for how future disputes are handled. The crisis is more than a diplomatic spat. It's a realignment of alliances and economic strategies, with global markets watching closely. As countries reconsider their partnerships, the ripple effects could reshape trade, security, and even cultural ties across the continent. The choices made now will shape the continent for years to come, influencing not just governments and businesses, but the daily lives of millions of people across North America. The rejected eggs are more than a trade dispute. They're a warning about the fragility of alliances. Nationalism and transactional politics have fractured trust, turning shared history into a battleground for short-term gains. The U.S. risks alienating a key partner, damaging its own reputation and stability. For Canada, the crisis is a catalyst for diversification, new trade partners, new defense options, and a more resilient strategy. The choices ahead are stark: rebuild diplomatic bridges or continue down a path of conflict and uncertainty. The stability of North America depends on cooperation, not confrontation. The current crisis threatens to unravel decades of progress. The future hinges on whether both nations can restore trust, or if everyone will pay the price for division.